I know we didn't see a lot of Hines Allen, but I really think her passing ability is going to help the Fever as well.
Every general manager across the WNBA just obsessively dissected Indiana Fever's opening preseason contest, and they all ruthlessly identified the identical target on their confidential evaluation sheets. We're witnessing what could become the most disastrous, career-ending personnel move in franchise annals. While casual observers fixate on Caitlin Clark's statistics and the dominant 109-91 final margin against New York Liberty, league executives are strategically lurking, prepared to execute the season's most devastating raid. Indiana's leadership stands perilously close to surrendering a once-in-a-generation 6 feet 4 inches perimeter assassin for precisely zero compensation, an incredible 42% from beyond the arc during her collegiate career. She just completed her professional introduction against championship-caliber opposition, and she irrefutably demonstrated she deserves rotation minutes. While every competing franchise, from Las Vegas to New York, Dallas to Los Angeles, is already dialing frantically. They're desperately hoping general manager Lynn Dunn, Kelly Krauskopf possess sufficient hubris to release her into free agency. Welcome back to WNBA Pro, the completely unfiltered, unapologetic, and intensely analytical destination for the sharpest basketball discourse available online. If you're seeking superficial statistical recitation, uninformed casual commentary, music, and corporate public relations material designed to shield fragile administrative egos, you absolutely must exit this content immediately. Today, we're ruthlessly exposing the confidential terrifying mechanics of the WNBA developmental contract vulnerability, the absolute tactical mastery displayed in Just Pissott's preseason introduction, the predatory acquisition strategy currently executed by rival championship contenders, and why Indiana Fever approaches the ultimate inexcusable failure of organizational resource stewardship report.
Problem is, again, Shatori Walker-Kimbrough, KK Timpson, and Justine Pissott have one spot on the team for them. And the Fever have basically, we heard from Chloe Peterson, they picked their 12 already. And all it means is that a Portland Fire, a Washington Mystics, any of these...
Look, Inker. Let's establish the mathematically irrefutable foundation of contemporary professional basketball. When you survey the complete WNBA landscape, the single most desperately sought, exorbitantly valuable, and practically unobtainable player archetype remains the towering elite perimeter threat. Organizations invest entire seasons deliberately losing, and countless millions relentlessly pursuing 6 feet 4 inches athletes who demonstrate instantaneous shooting mechanics and fundamentally pristine three-point technique. Yet, through some extraordinary draft night fortune, Indiana Fever obtained precisely that unicorn through a second-round selection. And yesterday, throughout her deliberately limited preseason introduction against New York Liberty, Pisset entered the Barclays Center floor and didn't merely perform adequately. She completely, undeniably confirmed every element of elite projection. Examine the unedited game footage meticulously. Across just 10 restricted minutes, she converted 2 of 4 field goal attempts, including draining a critical three-pointer and completing a flawless 2-for-2 performance from the charity stripe. She accumulated 6 points and an absolutely remarkable +6 efficiency rating during her limited exposure, but the raw statistics tell an incomplete story. The methodology matters exponentially more. This isn't some tentative rookie paralyzed by professional scrutiny. When Pisset secures possession along the perimeter, opposing defenses desperately rotate to challenge, but the horrifying truth for defenders remains that Pisset literally disregards the contest. Her release elevation reaches incredibly high, and her shooting mechanics operate so instantaneously that standard guard closeouts become geometrically meaningless. She receives the basketball on the wing and immediately ruthlessly elevates for the deep three-pointer without the slightest hesitation. She appeared incredibly comfortable. She appeared violently confident, but this introduces the absolute catastrophic nightmare currently developing within Indiana Fever's administrative offices. Because of this undeniable jaw-dropping exhibition, the confidential information has officially escaped. The entire WNBA now mathematically understands that Just Pissott represents a legitimate professional caliber rotation contributor, but the incredibly arrogant Indiana Fever leadership remains currently imprisoned in a terrifying financial constraint of their own engineering. The Fever currently maintains 16 highly talented athletes attending training camp. According to strict collective bargaining regulations, they're legally obligated to reduce that excessive number down to a maximum of 12 active roster positions, plus potentially 2 highly vulnerable developmental positions before the regular season officially commences on May 9. That mandates at least 4 professional basketball players must be completely eliminated from the organization, and nobody throughout mainstream coverage accurately discusses how this directly correlates to the massive financial problem the Fever arrogantly manufactured throughout free agency.
The ball gets inbound to Kiana Trader. They run a soft trap on Kiana Trader on the inbound. The ball gets thrown back to her to take the ball up. She dribbles the ball up, sees Hanju guarding her, goes into out dribble, gets a step on her going left.
Let me comprehensively dissect the precise financial mismanagement. Indiana Fever allocated massive franchise-altering resources to their veteran foundation. Kelsey Mitchell currently operates under a massive $1.4 million Supermax agreement. Aaliyah Boston just officially executed a massive, fully guaranteed 4-year, $6.3 million contract extension. They retained Sophie Cunningham through a substantial $665,000 arrangement. Lexi Hull received secured through a multi-year extension. Music, they locked down Monique Billings through a guaranteed 2-year commitment. They signed Myisha Hines-Allen to a heavily guaranteed veteran agreement. They acquired Tyasha Harris. Every individual contract was technically defensible in isolation, but collectively, they've left Indiana Fever with absolutely zero financial flexibility. Casual observers constantly demand that the Fever simply release a veteran like Myisha Hines-Allen to accommodate Pisset. Let me completely, brutally demolish that uninformed delusion immediately. Myisha Hines-Allen operates under a fully guaranteed contract. If Indiana Fever releases her, they remain legally obligated to compensate her entire salary, which completely applies against their incredibly restrictive salary cap. If they release her, they're mathematically forced to operate an 11-player roster because they physically cannot afford to acquire a replacement. They're financially paralyzed. This means the final roster position reduces to an absolute blood-soaked training camp competition between just Pisset and their highly drafted forward Katie Timpson. And this is precisely where administrative ego threatens to destroy the franchise's trajectory. Yes, Katie Timpson demonstrates superior physical strength and aggressive rebounding instincts, but she remains incredibly underdeveloped. She lacks elite spatial recognition, and she provides absolutely zero perimeter spacing. Pisset is a complete year and a half younger. She demonstrates significantly superior length, a vastly superior ball handling capability in half-court situations. And, most critically, a generational perimeter shooting ability. So, the highly probable terrifying reality suggests that Indiana Fever will stubbornly attempt to hide just Pisset through a highly vulnerable developmental contract. And this is precisely where every competing franchise throughout the WNBA will execute the ultimate acquisition.
You look at the Mercury team. Who's going to make the Mercury squad? Copper 1, Mac 2, Cole McCanny 3, Kat Westbeld 4, Ayayi 5, Bonner 6, AT 7, Wickham 8. They have 4 spots to go for, and all of these are...
You must deeply, fundamentally comprehend how the WNBA developmental contract vulnerability actually operates. A developmental position remains completely unprotected. If Indiana Fever assigns Pisset to a developmental arrangement, she receives compensation of a microscopic stipend totaling $750 weekly, but here exists the massive franchise-destroying complication. Any competing franchise throughout the WNBA can legally acquire her at any precise moment. All a rival organization must do is extend Pisset a standard, full-time WNBA contract, and she instantly packs her belongings, departs Indianapolis, and joins the competing franchise. The Fever possesses absolutely zero refusal authority. Music, Let me identify precisely which massive, highly intelligent WNBA franchises are actively, maliciously waiting in strategic positions to execute this precise predatory strategy. Consider the Dallas Wings. Dallas Wings desperately requires elite perimeter shooting. They just added generational playmakers through Paige Buchers and Azzi Fudd through the draft, but their roster remains terrifyingly deficient along the wing. Except now she's wearing a Dallas uniform and actively assisting a rival to contend for a championship. Consider the Los Angeles Sparks. The Sparks operate in complete, unmitigated reconstruction mode. They desperately require young elite shooters. They require massive size. They require high-ceiling players who can aggressively develop into starting contributors over the subsequent 2 to 3 seasons. Pissott completely satisfies every single one of those requirements. She would instantly receive starter minutes in Los Angeles. She would receive the massive developmental opportunities she requires to achieve her ceiling. And she would accomplish it in a massive media market where the Sparks are absolutely desperate for any competitive advantage they can legally obtain. Consider the New York Liberty. The Liberty just observed Pissott step onto their home floor yesterday and completely drain three-pointers in their presence. They witnessed firsthand precisely what her shooting mechanics resemble against their elite defense. And they possess the absolute superior organizational infrastructure to develop young talent throughout the league. If Pissott ends up in New York, getting positioned on the bench alongside Breanna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu, the Fever will have actively donated a lethal weapon to a super team they will confront multiple times this season, and potentially in post-season competition in subsequent years.
They have size, they have their point guards. And like Miniatore might not make the team. The Sun could take her. The tempo very well could say to Chloe Bibby, you know what? We've got a younger version of you who is much longer. We'll let Chloe Bibby go. Justine Pissott will take you in. We're trying to lose any.
Look, examine incredibly closely at the Phoenix Mercury. While Indiana Fever completely populated their training camp with guaranteed contracts, the Mercury purposefully entered training camp with only 8 guaranteed players on their roster. They intentionally preserved massive roster positions completely available. They're actively positioned back like predators, waiting to identify precisely which elite players become victims to the roster constraints of poorly managed franchises. The precise second Lynn Dunn attempts to conceal Justine Pissott onto a developmental arrangement, the Phoenix Mercury will instantly activate the acquisition mechanism and consider the Washington Mystics and the Toronto Tempo. The Mystics are actively dismantling their roster down to the absolute foundation, deliberately losing for generational talents like Juju Watkins or Sarah Strong. A 6'4" elite sharpshooter represents the precise perfect developmental asset for a rebuilding franchise, and the newly expanded Toronto Tempo would gladly acquire a 6'4" rookie with massive upside over an older physically maximized veteran. Music. This explains why Justine Pissott represents the absolute perfect geometric complement for Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is undeniably the greatest, most creative distributor in WNBA history. Her assist production isn't merely impressive, it's completely historic. She averaged an absolutely staggering 8.8 assists per contest last season. She generates wide-open opportunities for every individual player on the floor. Her gravitational pull from 30 feet completely distorts opposing defenses and mathematically opens up the perimeter for shooters. But that high-speed transition system only operates at its absolute peak when the shooters surrounding Clark can actually convert the attempt. Lexi Hull currently converts an elite 47% from three-point range when positioned alongside Clark. That represents the absolute gold standard of floor spacing. But Lexi Hull stands exactly 6 feet tall. She physically cannot elevate over massive defensive switches. She cannot attack smaller guards in post situations when the shot clock expires. She cannot effortlessly generate her attempt against elite 6'4" length. Justine Pissott absolutely can.
Both of them have similar weaknesses in terms of, I think KK is stronger. I think KK is a much better rebounder. I think KK is more athletic. Pissott has is much longer. Pissott is a better ball handler, she's a much better passer, and she shoots the ball better. And is a year and a half younger. I think in general, I'm looking at
6'4", with a flawlessly clean, incredibly high release elevation, Pisset can effortlessly generate her attempt against absolutely any elite defender throughout this league. When Caitlin Clark violently penetrates the lane and distributes the basketball to Pisset on the wing, the defensive closeout must be absolutely mathematically perfect, or the basketball travels straight through the net. And when opposing defenses desperately attempt to switch a smaller 5'10" guard onto Pisset, she literally elevates directly over their head as if they don't exist. That specific combination of towering stature and elite perimeter shooting represents exactly what Caitlin Clark desperately requires surrounding her. It's completely irreplaceable, and Indiana Fever selected it with a second-round selection, and they might actually possess sufficient arrogance to simply surrender it. Here's exactly what makes this situation incredibly urgent. The very next massive preseason contest occurs April 30th against Dallas Wings. Paige Buchers and Azzi Fudd are traveling to Indianapolis. Justine Pissott will receive another massive, highly televised audition. If she enters that floor, converts shots brilliantly again, demonstrates she can aggressively defend, and continues to appear completely comfortable at the professional level, Indiana Fever administrative leadership will confront a terrifying determination before them. Do they foolishly preserve a few $100,000 in short-term cap relief and allow her to depart the facility, or do they acknowledge their roster construction errors, identify a creative solution to retain the unicorn, and resolve the financial accounting subsequently? Every single great dynasty-building franchise throughout sports history has confronted this precise pivotal determination at some moment. You release the young elite talent because the corporate mathematics are temporarily restrictive presently, or do you become highly creative and identify a method to retain the precise player who might transform into a generational championship-winning asset? The Golden State Warriors completely revolutionized basketball because they retained Draymond Green when he was merely a second-round selection who wasn't even guaranteed a roster position. The Boston Celtics aggressively retained Marcus Smart when they already maintained a highly crowded backcourt. The truly great organizations identify a method. They execute the difficult financial determinations. They absolutely do not allow massive undeniable potential to depart the front entrance simply because of short-term accounting errors. Indiana Fever administrative leadership possesses a massive undeniable opportunity to demonstrate they represent a great organization immediately. Justine Pissott represents the ultimate organizational examination. If they retain her, they mathematically demonstrate they comprehend long-term championship-level roster construction. If they release her, every single rival super team throughout the WNBA will violently appreciate them for the absolute greatest gift of the off-season. Music. WNBA Pro has been aggressively declaring this precise reality since draft night, and we will continue declaring it until administrative leadership awakens. You absolutely do not allow a 6'4" sniper to depart the building. A massive, deeply appreciative acknowledgement to our highly loyal channel members like Sarah, Mark, and David for always maintaining the vision, financially supporting the channel, and actively demanding elite, uncompromising tactical analysis. We're aggressively constructing the absolute sharpest, most fearless basketball community across the entire internet, and your incredible loyalty makes this massive deep dive documentary content possible. Violently activate that subscribe button immediately if you desire the absolute deepest, most analytical, uncompromising roster breakdown across the internet that the lazy mainstream media remains completely terrified to report. Drop your completely unfiltered raw prediction in the comments section below regarding whether the administrative ego will ruin Caitlin Clark's offensive spacing by allowing Pisset to depart. Activate the notification bell immediately because the Dallas Wings preseason contest occurs in precisely 4 days. The highly classified final roster determinations are approaching rapidly, and the Predators are officially circling the Indiana practice facility.